This is One-on-One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show, coming at you for the next 90 minutes right here on Twitter for our Thanksgiving edition of One-on-One. Reaction to some of this weekend's happenings in the NFL, some NBA offseason feast or famine, college football playoff rankings are out, and two turkey games to preview. Alex Wool's our producer, Mike Legan, the other guy on my Zoom screen. Mike, happy Thanksgiving to you. Excited to get things going. A lot going on in the NFL, NBA, and everywhere.
Certainly. Nick, it's good to be here on this Thanksgiving Eve, especially with you. I know you're on Fordham's campus right now. You're kind of hanging out, so I'm sure you're kind of dying to get some things to say, some ideas out, and I think we got plenty to talk about, especially with NFL, NBA, college football, some baseball predictions for the free agency. You know, me and my Mets, I got some stuff to say, so very much looking forward to it.
Well, he wanted to start with the Mets. I personally don't want to start with the Mets, but hey,
well, that hasn't changed. Yeah,
whatever it is. We can just figure that out as the show goes on. I want to start with the NFL because I think that's where most of our news has begun. And we learned today that we're going to have two games tomorrow instead of three. The Steelers and the Ravens was supposed to be the primetime game tomorrow night. That, of course, is not happening. The Ravens having a litany of positive tests. Apparently, a staff member was not in compliance with the protocols and is apparently being disciplined for that. Before we get into what's playing on the field, what was your sort of reaction to hearing that, hey, we're not going to have a third game tomorrow? And some of the criticism from Pittsburgh Steelers players, I thought, and I think you agree with me, was a little bit misplaced.
Yeah, I definitely think it was misplaced on their part, especially given what's going on in our global or national atmosphere right now. I mean, look, these guys are football players. They're millionaires. And for them to be complaining about the fact that, first of all, this game's not even being canceled. We're moving this game, assuming that the tests clear and things stay, heading in the right direction. We're moving this game till Sunday. They're still going to play this week. So the fact that they're, you got, I don't remember off the top of my head, I think Chase Claypool was one of them, Eric Ebron, tweeting out saying, this is ridiculous. How can the NFL do this to us? Well, look, you're still going to play this week. And look, if I was an NFL player, I would be happy that, hey, you know what? We're maybe a little extra prepared. And, I can get to spend Thanksgiving with my family now. And then I can go play on Sunday and kick the Ravens' butt, especially if they're going to lose some players. Now, obviously, COVID's nothing to joke about. But I think these reactions to freak out at the NFL for keeping safety the priority is ridiculous, in my opinion. I mean, we have people dying every day in this country. And obviously, these guys are in great shape. And they're I don't think they're at a super high risk. But their reactions has just been ridiculous, in my opinion.
Yeah, it doesn't make a ton of sense to me either, and I'll take a bit of a different spin on it. It's just you're sitting there and saying, what do you want the NFL to do if the Ravens have had an outbreak on their team? They just will not have enough players who have not tested positive for COVID-19 to run out there and create a viable NFL environment to play on Thursday night. So you have one of two options. You can either postpone the game or cancel the game if you want to make the contention that the Ravens staffer acted so egregiously that the Ravens should forfeit the game because they're unable to play. But the idea that you're postponing it from Thursday to Sunday, that whole thing, it just doesn't make sense. And I know the Ravens were upset about their bye being taken away is probably the wrong word, although that's the way that they said it. It's more about it being shifted around. They've had to deal with some of the COVID casualties as a result of some of the other teams and dealing with Tennessee earlier this season as well. It's unfortunate. You want to have that third game, especially when you're talking about having Dallas and Washington and Detroit and Houston as the two other games, which are probably certainly not as intriguing as what Baltimore and Pittsburgh would have brought to the table. But to me, it just doesn't make a ton of sense because at some level, what do you want the NFL to do? Unless you're making the case that Baltimore should forfeit the game, which they aren't, I don't know what you have to say about the game being postponed. Look, Chase Claypool, you're Canadian, so this isn't even your Thanksgiving. And Eric Ebron has played on Thanksgiving a number of times when he was with Detroit. So just a couple of guys that I want to pick on there and say, it just doesn't make sense, guys. We got to follow the protocols. The NFL is doing as best it can to make sure that everyone's safe. And to me, it's just misguided to be criticizing the NFL for not canceling the game, for postponing it. I know playing on Thanksgiving is a really cool experience, but at the end of the day, guys, let's just make sure everyone's safe and that there is just an ability for Baltimore to field a viable NFL roster to play that game on Sunday. So that's where I stand on it. Let's get into some of the play on the field. And the Chiefs with a big win, comeback on Sunday night over the Raiders and the Bucks and the Rams. I want to start with the Chiefs and the Raiders because Patrick Mahomes, if we haven't stressed it enough on this program and everywhere already, is just remarkable. I mean, this dude is as good as it gets, leading that comeback drive to take down the Raiders, a team that looked like it might have had a shot to take down the Chiefs twice in the same season. Derek Carr played well. That was a good Raiders effort, but Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, they have to be the favorite in the AFC right now.
Yeah, I definitely think, look, they're the defending champs, so you'd have to give them the nudge over the Steelers. I got Patrick's stats from Sunday right in front of me. So he threw for 348 yards, 2 DTs, and 1 interception. But look, that's an average game for him. And look, he this is a tough Raiders team, but he still played well. And look, the thing that defines Patrick Mahomes in that game, he's getting that ball back. Derek Carr leads him down, the Raiders down the field. They take the lead late in the game. Pat Mahomes gets that ball back with a little under 2 minutes to go. He's got 1 timeout, and he just marches them down the field like it's nothing. And without a doubt, in my opinion, Patrick Mahomes is I think everyone would agree, is the best quarterback in the NFL right now, and it's not even close. And he's just unstoppable. There's nothing you can do with this guy. And I understand like these 2 games against the Raiders have maybe been some of his weaker games, but look, then obviously that final touchdown, there must have been a breakdown in coverage because he found Kelsey wide open in the end zone. Look, but this was a great game. I think, look, the Chiefs are definitely the favorites. But I also give props to the Raiders here because, look, you don't really see a lot of teams keep it that close with Kansas City. And look, we're looking at, Oakland. I still got it stuck in my
Las
head.
Vegas.
Las Vegas, excuse me. They'll always be Oakland to me a little bit. But Las Vegas, they're right there for a wild card spot. And, I think right now they're either like 5 or 6 in the wild card. I don't remember off the top of my head. But I definitely am impressed with Las Vegas. And I don't know. What do you think about them this season? Do you think that maybe they can make a run in the playoffs?
They're up and down, but I've been really impressed with the way that they played the Chiefs. And I think they have some elements that are really conducive to being a contender. They remind me a lot of maybe Tennessee last year because they can really run the football. Josh Jacobs and that big time offensive line with Derek Carr as a guy who I think is comparable to Ryan Tannehill. You're not getting that spectacular superstar performance out of a quarterback, but Derek Carr is by no means a scrub and is certainly serviceable and can win you playoff games. That's the way that Derek Carr is playing, especially right now. He's so comfortable in John Gruden's system, and he is taking care of the football, which is really important. Now, the question mark, and where we saw Tennessee take off at playoff time last year and where Las Vegas is going to have similar success, is looking at that defense, and that has been problematic at times. In particular, their secondary, where they've had injuries and they are young, so they're going to have to figure all those things out. I like what they have along the defensive line and in that front 7. They do a good job of stopping the run for the most part. To me, it's that secondary. And look, they have had 2 really good plans against Patrick Mahomes to keep themselves in games and give themselves a chance to win against Kansas City twice, which is pretty incredible the way that the Chiefs are playing football right now. I do like the Raiders. It'll be interesting because I think it's one of those, how well can they run the football and what type of defense are you getting out of their secondary? But I do think this is a team that can make a run. I don't know how high you are on them, but they really impressed me on Sunday night.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely look. I think the AFC, when it comes down to it, is going to be a 2-team race. It's going to be Pittsburgh and Kansas City. I don't have the Raiders necessarily winning a Super Bowl this year, making it there. I want to say this, though. You bring up the comparison between maybe this year the Raiders are last year's Tennessee Titans. Well, first off, I just checked. So Las Vegas currently has the last wild card spot, so they're hanging on. Baltimore is hovering around there. We'll see what happens. But I would say this. I think Derek Carr and Al Michaels, who was calling the game Sunday night, pointed this out. He is really, and Collinsworth said this too, one of the more underrated quarterbacks in the NFL. I mean, we remember coming into this year, they have Mariota over there, and there was some speculation, is Gruden going to turn to Mariota? Is he going to be the guy now? Is he going to be, maybe he's going to want to put this guy in? Because there was also, remember when Gruden got the job, there was talk of, does he like Derek Carr? Is this really going to work out long-term? And I think Derek Carr has embraced John Gruden. I think he's shown that he can still be a great quarterback in this league. Is he going to be a top 5 quarterback? No. But look. I think he's a Ryan Tannehill plus. I trust Derek Carr to lead me down the field. At the end of the day, I just think the Chiefs' offense was more explosive the other night. And like you said, the Raiders' defense seems to be some pause, and maybe they have a little bit of a pass rush. I like Max Crosby over there on the defensive line. But look, Las Vegas, are they going to win a Super Bowl this year? No. But I think they're definitely going to be in the mix, and I would not be shocked if they had a first-round upset. And I got to give props to John Gruden because a lot of people said when he got the job, is this guy still in touch with the league? He's been out of it a while. Can he still do this? And I think he's proven that he can.
I do too. I think that they, again, as I mentioned, have had back-to-back really good plans against Kansas City, and that's a credit to coaching and being prepared. So we'll shift from the AFC to the NFC. A big win for the Los Angeles Rams, a 3-point win over Tom Brady on Monday Night Football. Apparently, Monday Night Football in prime time is past Brady's bedtime, but he has not had back-to-back great performances in Tampa Bay. Buccaneers were thought of as a major player in the NFC playoff picture, as a team that many thought might go to the Super Bowl, but a drubbing at the hands of the New Orleans Saints, and now this loss to the Los Angeles Rams. Things are not looking great right now in Tampa Bay, and that offense really lacks an ability to throw the football down the field at all. That's where they've gotten in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, look, I gotta say selfishly, and maybe you feel the same way. I don't know. I know for me, Tom Brady, look, as a Jets fan, Tom Brady has caused me a lot of pain.
Oh, there are no tears from me.
So I have to say personally, when he went down to Tampa, first of all, I thanked him for leaving the division, but also I said, you know what, this would be great. Can Tom Brady go down there, stick it to Bill Belichick, prove that he was the guy? I was rooting for that. And frankly, so far, he has not really proved that. You bring up the fact that they've struggled to push the ball down the field. Brady was one of 9 on passes that were more than 15 yards on Monday night. That is atrocious. This guy, look, no one's disputing who Tom Brady is career-wise. This is a Hall of Fame quarterback, maybe the greatest to ever play. But he is looking a little suspect, and it seems to me, unless he has all day to stand in that pocket, and look, his offensive line is doing a good job. It's just he needs an inordinate amount of time to make sure he can set and throw. And when he has the time, he makes the play. But you can't ask your offensive line to block all day, especially when you're going to be a playoff team, potentially going up against some premier pass rushes. And I'm really concerned about Brady's ability to carry this offense.
Yeah, you should be. And the games that Tom Brady has not played well, you're talking about interior pressure and pressure from the defensive line. Aaron Donald on the line for the Rams is as good as it gets, and Cam Jordan and Hayward on the New Orleans defensive line as well. That's just a really good a pair of defensive lines and teams that really get after it. So you know that was going to be a problem for Brady in both of those games. It just strikes me that Bruce Arians has not adapted to what Brady seems to do well the way that Bill Belichick had. And look, Belichick and McDaniels and their offensive staff. And I'm not asking Bruce Arians to be Bill Belichick because he's not, and we understand that that's not how things work. But at the end of the day, you need to adjust your offense to the strengths of your players. And Bruce Arians and Byron Leftwich are not doing that. Tom Brady is a guy who has extremely great knowledge of the game. His processing is fantastic. So what you need to be able to do is let him sit back, take the reins of the offense. You're running different route combinations. You're not pushing the ball down the field, and let him find the open man by spreading things out. Take advantage. The numerous playmakers Tampa Bay has on offense. They're not doing that. They're trying to run the same offense that they were with Jameis Winston, and it just doesn't make any sense. There's no way that you can continue to try and push the football down the field. It just doesn't add up. There's no way you can keep doing that, especially because that's never been Brady's strong suit, and it has become progressively not his strong suit as he has gotten older. This wasn't a good strategy for him when he was 25 years old, let alone 43. So what they're doing really confuses me. And then that defense, which has been a little bit boom or bust at times, and they have found some struggles here recently. They've done enough to allow Tampa Bay to win games, but their offense really hasn't come through. And then the final point for me about Tampa Bay, They brought in Brady because they weren't happy with the way that Jameis Winston had a propensity to turn the football over. So Brady was in there to take care of the football and make good decisions. They're not doing that right now. So honestly, I don't see much of an upgrade over Jameis Winston with what Tom Brady's doing right now. That may sound a little bit ridiculous, but if they're going to try and run that same offense and put the ball in harm's way, they're not better offensively right now.
No, actually, I think that's a great point. I mean, Brady has thrown 5 interceptions in primetime games, and some of those ones on Monday night, there was no one in the area. I don't know what he was looking at. I mean, this team overall, they're 2-4 against teams that are above 500. They're 1-3 in primetime games. They should be 0-4 in primetime. The Giants gifted them that game. I mean, they got outplayed, and the Giants, they're a young team. They couldn't close it out. I look, you bring up a great point. We all know, going back to his days, especially in Arizona when he had Carson Palmer, that Bruce Arians loves to throw the football down the field. And that's just not Brady's strength. And the numbers are showing us, look, this team is not winning games. They are not beating good teams. If you want to be a Super Bowl contender, you have to play to your strengths. And Tom Brady, like you said, his strength is the quick intermediate passes to people, as we remember, like a Wes Welker or a Julian Edelman. Not even had to be a slot guy, but he's about getting the short stuff, moving down the field, the ding and dunk. And it's not what they're doing in Tampa, and they got to change it up. And with the defense, look, Todd Bowles is the defensive coordinator. Anyone who knows me as a Jet fan knows that I am not a fan of Todd Bowles. I do not think that he is the best defensive mind.
Oh, come on. He's done a great job there, though. You can't say that.
Look, I'm not saying he hasn't done a good job, but look, it's just a proven fact that his defenses, I mean, look, there have been times when there are guys wide open. Look, maybe it's a little personal for me with Todd Bowles, but I don't like what I'm seeing all the time in the defense. I'm not going to deny they're improved. What annoys me more than anything is people like Joe Buck tell me on the Fox broadcast how Todd Bowles is the hot head coaching candidate. Did you watch what happened for 4 years in New York? Did we all forget that happened? But that's besides the point. But to go what you said about Jameis Winston real quick, I agree. If you're just going to turn the ball over all the time, there's no difference between Jameis and Brady. At least Jameis could throw the ball down the field a little bit. I mean, Tampa Bay, at the beginning of the year, I was like, maybe this could be a team we can Super Bowl contender. Look, let me tell you right now, this team even makes the playoffs, unless they turn things around dramatically over the next few weeks. If they make the playoffs, I am predicting a first-round loss. I don't care where they are in the rankings. This team, I have no confidence in this team to do any damage in the playoffs.
They would be on the road. The division seems to be a tall task right now. They lose to New Orleans twice and are really on a skid right now. Tom Brady has thrown 9 interceptions this year. He had 8 all of last year, so a difficulty adjusting that. Before we move on, just to answer what you said about Todd Bowles, which was, in my opinion, completely ridiculous. I know you have a vendetta against him because things didn't work out with the Jets. And look, sometimes there are coaches who are very good coordinators who don't work out as head coaches. Maybe Todd Bowles falls into that category. Maybe if he gets another shot, he can turn things around with a more competent organization than the New York Jets. But Todd Bowles has done a great job with that defense with not a ton of help. They're not like particularly impressive personnel wise. I don't know that they have stars.
You're not impressed
all around
by
the
Steve
field.
McSplendon?
No, not really. I mean, I like Jason Pierre-Paul, but I don't know that he's still a stud in his day. Some of the linebackers they have are good, a young secondary. So Todd Bowles has done a very good job.
Look,
I know that their defense isn't great. Just to sit here and listen to you slander Todd Bowles, I won't let it happen. I know you don't like him.
I'll slander Todd Bowles every day of the week.
I know you don't like him from his days with the Jets, but he has done a good job in Tampa Bay. And quite frankly, in my opinion, does deserve another shot at being a head coach with an organization that does not wear green and throw up all over itself. So we got to move on to the other team
of course.
that is in Florida. We'll go to the Miami Dolphins here. The Jets do have the Dolphins, so I guess we'll have to stick with teams that throw up on themselves. But I want to get to the Dolphins' angle of this game first. And Tua Tagovailoa getting the boot. He gets benched in the fourth quarter of their loss against Denver. Ryan Fitzpatrick comes in, as Jets fans are well accustomed, throws the soul-crushing interception in the end zone to lose the game. I thought this was extremely curious in decision-making from Brian Flores to rattle your rookie quarterback in the way that he did for Miami. I'm not saying that Tua is not mentally tough, but at the first sign of, hey, things aren't going great, we didn't get great special teams and defense play. So Tua's going to have to try and win us the game. And our offensive line is not getting it done. So Tua's struggling. To see him yank him and pull the plug that quickly, I thought that was really a difficult move from Brian Flores to see him say, this is a top 5 pick in Tua Tagovailoa. And that's an extremely short leash.
Yeah, I mean, look, you're all you're doing. A lot of people brought this up when they made the switch to Tua. It was, this is a Miami team that's in playoff contention. They're battling for the wild card. They're up and coming. And there was a lot of talk of, do you stick with Fitz? Do you maybe try to make a run here? But they said, no, it's Tua's team. It's going to be his team in the future. We got to make the move to him. And once you do that, you're stuck with Tua. I don't care how bad he plays. He's a rookie quarterback. The only thing you're going to do by taking him out of that game is really hurt his confidence, like you mentioned, Nick. And it seems like they're trying to play both sides of the coin here. At one angle, they're trying to develop Tua, but at the other side, they're trying to make the playoffs because they want to put Fitz in and maybe they'll win the game. It's just incomprehensible to me. And I really have to question the decision. And I mean, look, you have Flores coming out saying, hey, Tua's going to start this week. You have Fitz saying this is Tua's team. And that's all good and well. But it doesn't change the fact that you took Tua out of a game when you gave him the keys to the car, essentially, and said, this is your team, run with it. Now look, he's going to play the Jets this week. So I think his confidence is going to go right back up. So I wouldn't really worry about it for too long. But, you know, I like Flores as a coach. And let me tell you, I would give anything for him to be the Jets coach. But like you, I really got to question that move. I don't agree with it.
It doesn't make a ton of sense to me, just because it's about what type of season are you looking to have and what are your goals? Is it about putting the best team on the field for competing for a Super Bowl? Because maybe that is with Ryan Fitzpatrick at quarterback. However, Ryan Fitzpatrick at quarterback is not going to get you to a Super Bowl. It might advance you farther in the playoffs. It might get you to the playoffs, whereas you might not make it with Tua at the helm with an expanded 17 playoff this year. But I just don't understand what their outlook is, because at some point you need to do what's best for you to get to the end goal of winning the Super Bowl. That is playing Tua, getting him the experience and developing him into a franchise quarterback. That's where a Super Bowl for Miami is going to be won. And to see them abandon the plan, they were so patient. And then they saw Fitz play well at the beginning of this year. It wasn't Fitz being benched for poor performance. They knew they were putting in Tua after the bye. So to kind of just go through and calculate that plan the way they did and be so patient and be so married to the plan that they were going to go through with, and then just rip it up in a matter of 4 quarters was just really surprising to me for an organization that has done a lot of things right over the last couple of years, and they'll get an opportunity to draft a couple of more first rounders this year and improve that roster going into next year. I think Miami can be a team that is a contender in the AFC, but to just blatantly disregard the development of your young quarterback, a top 5 pick, just made no sense to me. And we'll see if they pay the price. Look, Tua has not looked terribly impressive in his first few starts, and that's not to knock him necessarily. There's development that happens in different ways, and we'll see. He may still not be 100% recovered and hadn't played a ton of football last year with that injury, and he may be healthy, but he's still not in that rhythm. So we'll see if he can reclaim that, but it just never made a ton of sense to me. He doesn't look comfortable, and you want him to continue to get comfortable before it's too late. And sometimes you can ruin a rookie in his first year, and you're hoping that Miami doesn't do that. We'll see what he can bring to the table against the Jets this weekend. Final thought here. Want to get to another injury. Joe Burrow goes down a torn ACL. The Bengals will play the Giants this weekend. Joe Burrow was in contention, if not the front runner for Rookie of the Year. He and Justin Herbert were going to battle that thing out. And just a really terrible situation to see Burrow go down like that, because he was having one heck of a season for a Bengals team that needed an infusion of life with the number 1 pick, and he certainly gave it to him, at least through this first half.
Yeah, I mean, I was watching, I had the Red Zone on Sunday, and we were cutting to that injury. I mean, it was just gruesome. I mean, to see what happened to him, that was tough to watch. And it breaks your heart. He's doing everything the right way. He's playing for a very, let's just call it what it is, a bad team. He hasn't done anything negative to hurt the team in terms of publicity stuff. He's been working hard. He's been grinding. He's been trying to prove that he could be a franchise quarterback. I think he's been proving that so far. it's terrible to watch. Now he not only did he tear his ACL, he tore his MCL too, which just makes it a little more serious. Now, we hope he can come back and be the same guy. I think hopefully if this serves as a wake up call. I think Cincinnati had a very questionable offensive line coming into this season, so I think they got to put an emphasis on protecting Joe going forward. But look, your heart breaks for the kid. Well, not really a kid; he's like our age, but it's tough to watch. So nothing but the best to Burrow. I don't think the Bengals are going to win another game, so we'll see what happens with them. I don't think they're going to get the number one pick, but hey, maybe losing out, they can get some more talent to put beside him. But yeah, that was tough to watch.
They may want to go offensive line with that evidently high first round selection that they are going to gain after having to turn to one of Ryan Finley or Ryan Allen. It looks like it'll be Allen this week, who was not particularly impressive in his spot starting role in Denver a season ago. He's going to be activated off of the practice squad. Bengals have officially eliminated that Ryan Finley can be a viable starting quarterback. They're working on eliminating Allen this year, but they're going to go with him before they make their final decision going forward. We're going to have to take a quick break here on Nightly One-on-One. On the other side, we're going to talk about some Mets and Yankees free agency. I'm going to talk about the Yankees. Legan's going to talk about the Mets. We're probably going to disagree a lot. Stay with us. We'll be back after this. Here on One-on-One Nightly, New York's longest running sports call-in show. If you want to join the conversation at all, drop a comment below and we will get to it. Some interesting comments that we've seen so far. Adam Gase going to turn the Jets around this year, maybe? Yeah, I don't think so, considering they have officially been eliminated from playoff contention. I think that's more Legan's area of expertise. I don't know if you want to comment on Adam Gase turning the Jets around this year.
Well, I think it's a little late. Look, it wouldn't be past the Jets to bring him back next year because they're so inept. But I want to address another comment we got here down below from a good friend of mine, Joseph Farella. He said, "Hey, Mike, do you think the Jets and the Giants should have an off-season barbecue to promote camaraderie between the franchises?" Honestly, maybe. That could be a good idea, Joe. Who knows? And we got some fantasy questions. Browns defense against the Jags, good fantasy start. Yeah, the Jaguars are pretty terrible, but I would take the Dolphins defense against the Jets if you're going to get that. But love to see the interaction on One-on-One Nightly, and Keep it up, everybody. Good stuff.
Some would say that there are people sleeping on Mike Glennon, who's going to get the start for the Jags against Cleveland this week. And I would have to say I'm in hibernation on Mike Glennon. He is going to lead Jacksonville to exactly no touchdowns. So a tough situation for Jacksonville. Although, really, is it that tough of a situation? I think they are tanking for Trevor. That's the primary competition. That's the game within the game this year. Who can lose more, the Jacksonville Jaguars and the New York Jets? The Jets are winning that losing competition. They're up one game in the standings, 0-10 to 1-9. That dastardly win on opening week for the Jaguars over the Indianapolis Colts has really put them in a difficult position. Let's switch gears here to Major League Baseball. The Mets and the Yankees entering free agency. Free agency is going to be slow this year. We know that. There haven't been many moves. The one that sticks out, Charlie Morton signing a one-year, $15 million deal with the Atlanta Braves. He's sort of a special case because we knew that he wanted to stay close to home if he was going to continue to play at all. So you knew he'd want to be somewhere down south in the Tampa, Atlanta area. He ends up going to Atlanta. But there's a lot of changes in the Mets organization as they approach free agency, a potential for a lot of changes for the Yankees as they approach free agency. We can start with the Mets first. What are you looking for most with just a complete reversal, of course, in organizational strategy, organizational structure? Sandy Alderson, Steve Cohen at the helm, as we have beaten to death on this program and how great that is for all of the Mets fans. But realistically, with the money and the resources that they have at their disposal, where should they be targeting first this offseason?
Realistically, everything's on the table. This team is going to be I'm not going to be delusional, even though I am at times. First of all, let me just say, I haven't had the chance to say this. I don't think I've had the chance to say it yet on the air about the Mets. I usually rant about the Jets on here, but I am beyond thrilled. I think, Nick, you were there the night that the Mets sale was finalized. I was pumped, and I'm still pumped, so I'm beyond thrilled with this team. But if we're going to go specific moves that I want them to make, I think the first one that I'd like to see is JT Realmuto. That's what I want. Wilson Ramos at catcher had a good first year with the Mets. Last year was not that good. You know, there's some hesitation that we're hearing about Realmuto maybe not wanting to come to a big market like New York. Look, I want this guy. He is a 5-tool player. He can run, he can hit, he can catch, he can do it all. He's the kind of guy that I want. I also want Trevor Bauer, but I'm a little skeptical of that kind of personality in the New York market. But at the end of the day, you get Trevor Bauer, then you got a rotation with Jacob deGrom, Noah Syndergaard, Marcus Stroman, Trevor Bauer, and then the rookie David Peterson going into the second year. So I would target Realmuto. I would target Trevor Bauer. I want Francisco Lindor. I want the world. I want everybody. You know what? I said I was going to be delusional. I don't care. I want everyone. Steve Cohen and his beautiful money. He is now the richest owner in baseball, $13 billion. This man has come to save this franchise, come to save the Met fan like me. I want everything. Also, DJ LeMahieu wouldn't be bad. Your thoughts?
Alex Wools, our producer, knows the stat that I'm about to reiterate here on these airwaves. In 2019, the last full season in Major League Baseball, of the top 5 teams in payroll, 3 of them missed the playoffs. So the Mets can spend all they want, but it's about getting the right pieces in place and spending the money wisely, because at some point it becomes counterproductive to spend because of the luxury tax and the amount of money that you will have to give to other organizations throughout Major League Baseball. Now, I don't think that that's going to be a problem with the Mets, at least initially, because they don't have such a ridiculous payroll right now. And if Cohen tests the limits on that, they'll be fine to deal with that in the near term. I agree that these are the top free agents and guys that the Mets should be targeting. I agree that Realmuto should be priority number 1, although it may be difficult to lure him from Philadelphia, where it sounds as though he seems intent on staying, although you never know. And again, if Cohen type of offer, money, as we know in Major League Baseball, always talks. Bauer is an interesting case, but I think the Mets can be okay without adding another starting pitcher of that caliber. They can get by and be a good enough contender with deGrom at the top, as good as it gets, with Syndergaard and with Stroman, and adding somebody who is better than Michael Waka or Rick Porcello. They certainly have to replace those two and figure out something at the back end, but it doesn't have to necessarily be Trevor Bauer for them to be successful. Where I would look for them, in addition to the catcher spot, and potentially now if they would be in play for Francisco Lindor, although I don't know that the Mets have enough, certainly the money to pay him, but enough in the prospects that Cleveland would demand to get back, because Cleveland is so budget tight that they can't afford to take a discount or something along those lines and not get full return for Francisco Lindor. They just can't afford to do it. So that to me is the wild card. And then you're talking about how the rest of the pieces fit in their infield. There was a report today that potentially Ahmed Rosario would try out playing in the outfield maybe and see how that would go. But I think overall there is the starting pitching where they can be okay. They could use some upgrades potentially at catcher and elsewhere, maybe at shortstop. But they got to do something about that bullpen, because that bullpen has really not been conducive to them winning games the last couple of years. And I don't know if it's somehow a new way of pitching for Edwin Diaz, a new mentality, if he can somehow turn it around or become some semblance of the pitcher he was in Seattle. I don't want to say, oh, the Mets should go out and get a new pitching coach, because I don't know that that's necessary for anyone to have a change of scenery other than Edwin Diaz. Like, that's not fair to the staff that they have there right now. But something's got to change. And if not, they're going to have to really go all in on the bullpen, because that to me is the other issue here. And it's in part a chicken and the egg conversation, because at times their bullpen was a lot weaker last year because of the holes that they had at the back end of their starting rotation when you take out Gesellman and you take out Seth Lugo. But to me, they need to get depth in the bullpen, and that to me is where to start in addition to Real Muto, and see where things go from there. That's my perspective on it. But in addition to that, that bullpen seems to me to be a pretty big concern.
I totally agree. Look, there have been many a game where it seemed like the Mets had they had it easy. They were going to win this one and the bullpen blew it. Now, I do think you can address some of your bullpen issues by adding depth in the rotation. So moving, like you said, moving Lugo, first of all, Lugo was really he was very up and down in the rotation. So I think if you get another quality starter, you can move him back into the bullpen. If you got another starter, you can move Matz into the bullpen. Now I know Matz, he's really dead set on being a starter, but hey, look, you're under contract. You're going to do what the coach tells you to do. Maybe going out and get someone like a Brad Hand. I don't know. I think the Mets, this is not going to be an overnight fix for the Mets. I think first off, you got to bank on, this is the other thing about relievers, and I don't know if you feel the same way. Relievers are a lot like kickers in the NFL. Year to year, very hard to predict how good they're going to be. One year they could be off the charts. The next year they would look at Edwin Diaz. 2018 with the Mariners, off the charts. 2019 with the Mets, he was terrible. This year he was great. I mean, it's just so hard to find a consistent reliever. I would just take the approach of the starters. You can get a little more. I'm a little more confident in the starter market than I am in the reliever market. So I would go about it approaching it. Let's build the bullpen. Build the rotation. Whoever doesn't fit in the rotation, we're going to move to the bullpen and go from there. With the Mets, and I'll say this, like you said, money is not the end all be all. They're not going to fix this franchise overnight by spending money. And I think the great thing about Steve Cohen is he has said adamantly that it's not about the money. He was on Baseball Night in New York on SNY just a little bit before our show. And he was, talking about different things. And he said he wanted to make New York, the Mets, a place to come, not just for the paycheck, which I think speaks to it all. We have to build a team that's not just about money. Look at the Washington football team. They got it's a very similar situation with them. They had Dan Snyder, an owner who was a fan. He spends a lot of money. They're terrible. I know it's the NFL. It's a little different, but it's got to be about more than the money. Now, I'm already seeing good things. You have a guy like Sandy Alderson who built the Mets team that went to the World Series in 2015. He also drafted Jeff McNeil, Pete Alonso, Dominic Smith, guys that I love that are great, Michael Conforto. And they're investing heavily in the analytics department. Now, I'm not a big fan of Moneyball. But it's just a simple, I don't like, for example, what they did with Blake Snell in the World Series. That's like ridiculous. But using analytics to find those diamonds in the rough, like a Gio Urshela with the Yankees. The Mets had one of the lowest ranked, I think it was last in Major League Baseball in analytics for the Will Pollins side of the team. And now Cohen has seen that that's an issue. He's going to invest in that, and he's going to try to turn the team around the smart way. So I think he's got a multi-pronged approach that I've been impressed by.
Yeah, that's certainly where it starts. It's about shifting the culture and the attitude within the organization about doing some things smarter. And I agree with your point about relievers, not necessarily in kickers, because I think that there are more Justin Tuckers who are consistent year in, year out in terms of major league relievers. There are guys who are going to come in and shove and be really great. The problem is with the number of innings that they pitch. You're talking about guys who will throw at max maybe 100 or so innings a season. There is certainly a greater volatility of success or failure compared to starting pitchers who you're talking about are going to pitch 200 plus innings if they are going to be able to pitch a full season. So we'll leave the Mets there for a second and talk about the Yankees just for the last few minutes that we have here in this segment. Priority number one for the Yankees is obvious. It's got to be re-sign DJ LeMahieu. This is a guy who was in the MVP conversation, meant everything to the Yankees over the last couple of years, the 2 years that he was in there. He was a bargain and a half for the Yanks over these first two seasons. He won't be anymore. He's going to command a massive payday. But the Yankees are really going to have to, in my estimation, give him a blank check, because this guy, with his versatility and what he does for them at the top of the lineup, the ability to play second, to play first, to play third, wherever they need him, this is a guy that the Yankees need to get back if they want to make a run at things in 2021.
Yeah, I definitely look. I think you already heard, if I'm not mistaken, DJ said he'd be willing. He didn't say it officially, but it's the rumor is that he'd be willing to take less money to come to the Yankees. I think that's got to be a priority, and some other things to think about. James Paxton, Tanaka. Who do you resign? Either of them? Do you resign both of them? Both of them have injury problems. They're both 32. Like, you got to put someone behind Garrett Cole. Also, Brett Gardner. I mean, do you bring him back again? I'd like to see. Look, I'm not a Yankee fan, but I like to see Clint Frazier play every day in the outfielders play more. I think he proved that he can do that. It's just some things that you got to consider.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough couple of decisions that the Yankees are going to have to make, and I think that they're going to try and bring back one of Paxton or Tanaka. And for my money, it's Tanaka right now, although he wasn't great in the postseason this year and at times struggled during the regular season. Again, a shortened season and everything kind of gets thrown off. But it really comes down to how confident are you that James Paxton is going to be healthy, because when he had the back surgery coming into this season, he's throwing 92 miles an hour. Now, James Paxton, who throws 97, 98, is a guy that I want to keep around, and I think is a guy worth doing so. But 92, 93 James Paxton, with the struggle with command and location, is not somebody who is a guy you can pay a lot of money to. And now the Yankees may feel like they're in a position, based upon this season and the uncertainty, if they like what they see from him from a health perspective, could bring him back on a short-term, low-risk deal, and that's also available to them. I don't think the Yankees are going to go out and spend a ton and reinvent the wheel. I think they're pretty well content to run back most of what they have. I think for them, as odd as it sounds, it might be an addition in the bullpen, because that's where things really got off the rails for them last year. And they're going to have to find a way to see. We were talking about Edwin Diaz with the Mets. Adam Ottavino is going to have to find a pulse for the Yankees, because they are paying him too much money on that back end to not get any results. And Aroldis Chapman, I know, has gotten some criticism at times, but on the whole, he's been a really solid closer for them. Zach Britton struggled a little bit in 2020, but on the whole has been a really good reliever for them. And they've had some other good contributions from guys like Chad Green in that back end. Adam Ottavino's got to find it, and if not, they're going to have to bring in some help there. I like what they have in their lineup for the most part. I don't know that Brett Gardner comes back. A guy that really intrigues me, but you're going to have to figure out a spot for him, really, is Michael Brantley, who's going to be a free agent. And I don't know if he's going to command too much money, or if the commitment is not something the Yankees would be willing to make. But if you think about Giancarlo Stanton being pigeonholed into mostly playing the DH spot, although I believe he's going to start playing left field a little bit more, I think that was really about this year and making sure he was healthy. This guy is getting paid too much money to not play in the field. So I think you may see that going forward. I really like what I saw with Clint Frazier, but when you're talking about corner outfield spots, Judge is going to be in right. Frazier is sort of redundant. And as good as he was, he's another power hitter who strikes out a lot and has played better defense, but wasn't fantastic. And I don't know if they would consider platooning to save the money and the financials and how that outlook looks, with platooning one of Frazier and Tauchman, or Frazier and Gardner. They could bring him back because he wouldn't command a ton, but I think his time is done in New York. I would be really intrigued by the potential of bringing in a Michael Brantley on a short-term deal. It would be lucrative because he is a very good player, but you're talking about another left-handed bat in that lineup, a guy who hits for contact, puts the ball in play. The Yankees have a bunch of guys who can hit the ball out of the ballpark, have a ton of power, and strike out a lot. Michael Brantley at the top of that lineup is a guy who can move runners over, who can put the ball in play. I think would be a really welcome addition to this Yankees lineup, especially as a left-handed bat, and could add a different dimension into that lineup. So that, to me, would be a priority. I don't know if he's on their radar at all. Probably not. That seems like sort of a pipe dream. I think that when you rank sort of the priorities in the offseason, I think that Brantley is certainly not at the top. You want to fix that bullpen and maybe find a cost-effective replacement in the middle of that rotation as well. I think a lot of fans forget the Yankees will be getting Luis Severino back. I think that's a big deal as well. Garrett Cole at the top of that rotation, and Severino is the number 2. They can figure out the rest of it with David Garcia, who really came on towards the tail end of last year, Jordan Montgomery, and whatever they figure out with one of Tanaka, Paxton, or somebody else in that 3 role. We're going to have to take another break here on Wednesday night one-on-one. When we come back, we're going to do some Feast or Famine, a Thanksgiving-themed segment where we detail the contenders or pretenders so far here in this NBA offseason and what we are looking for in the 2020-2021 season when things get kicked off towards the end of December. We'll get into all of that and more. Stay with us right here on One-on-One. running sports call-in show on this Wednesday, November 25th, Thanksgiving Eve here from New York City. We're going to get into some feast or famine, talking about NBA contenders or pretenders in a Thanksgiving-themed segment based upon some of the moves that we've seen early on here in this NBA offseason. We'll run through a number of teams, and Mike and I will give you our opinion about whether it's going to be a Thanksgiving feast or not so much for some of these teams after we've seen what moves they have made. Legan, are you ready to go?
Yeah, I am ready to go. I'd like to address one of our comments real
Oh,
quick. We have an
goodness.
active comment tonight. One of our commenters said, "Will LaMelo Ball going to the Hornets finally settle the Levar Jordan debate?" I hope so. I would love to see that. Can we put that? They're gonna have Tyson on pay per view on Saturday. Can we put that? Like we got the match nowadays with Charles Barkley and all of them. Can we do a live stream of MJ versus Levar? I would love to see Levar. Like first of all, obviously Levar would lose, but it would be hilarious.
The thing that was disappointing to me in that whole situation was that they asked LaMelo about it in his introductory press conference, and he kind of refused to answer. Like
Yeah, I saw that.
he didn't want to say what everyone was thinking, that yeah, my dad would lose to Michael Jordan. I don't understand that. He's Michael Jordan. So I don't care if he's 80.
He's
Michael
washed, bro.
Jordan
He's
is
washed.
yeah. So that was just the most ridiculous thing. And part of the problem is we're talking about him. That's part of the issue.
That is true.
That
He's
we're
doing what
talking
he
about
wants.
LeVar Ball right now on these airwaves. But no, LeVar would not be beating Michael Jordan, and that debate has been settled for a long, long time, even before he said anything. So let's get into feast or famine and start with the New York Knicks, who have made a number of moves, selecting Obi Toppin in the first round, Miles Powell signing as an undrafted free agent, Austin Rivers, Nerlens Noel as some of the signings that they have made as Leon Rose and Worldwide West try to revamp this Knicks organization, making some what I think a lot of people would consider smart moves. Is it going to be feast or famine for the Knicks at MSG this season?
Well, first off, it'll definitely be a famine, but that's not to say I don't like what the Knicks are doing. This is not a. This is at most they'll compete at the end of the season for that play-in tournament they're going to have now. At most, maybe Thibodeau can get some stuff out of them. This is not going to be a playoff team, but I love what they're doing. Obi Toppin, I love the pick. You're getting a guy that's more developed, more seasoned. He's not like, LaMelo coming like very on the younger side. He's a little more seasoned. He shot 70% from the field. Now I know he's a four, so he's gonna like play closer to the basket. So obviously that percentage can be higher. He shot 40% from three. Now obviously this is all in college and it's all in, as we know, the A10, which we know pretty well. But I love Toppin. I love Miles Powell. I'm from New Jersey. Watched a fair number of Seton Hall games. I was shocked that he didn't get drafted, at least second round flyer, just try to take him. I mean, this guy was an All-American. He was the biggest player of the year last year. He won the Jerry West Award for best guard in the college basketball. The fact that the Knicks got him is just great. So definitely famine, but I like what they're doing.
There hasn't been a feast at MSG in a long time. It really hasn't. And look, I'm sorry, but we're going to continue to be hungry because this is famine. And I agree with you. I do like some of the moves that the Knicks have made. Obi Toppin, as you mentioned, is a guy who you feel like is a little more seasoned, and especially when the Knicks have had such issues developing players, maybe take a chance on a guy who's a little bit more developed and hope that what Anthony Grant and Dayton did is going to translate to the NBA, and some of his development has happened already, and he's further along than when the Knicks have to get their hands on him and figure everything out. So you like what you see from Obi Toppin, and Miles Powell is another guy who's a bit of an older guy relative to the young players that are coming into the NBA. Austin Rivers, there's not a ton there for me. I think that he is a quality player in this league. I don't know that there's a ton to necessarily get excited about. He's not a franchise changer by any stretch of the imagination, and is a guy who can, if given the right role, can fill it very well, and did that at times in Houston and with the Clippers. So I like that move. And Nerlens Noel, you're taking a flyer and hoping that he can sort of realize some of that potential. What's that?
That one puzzled me a little bit.
Yeah, you're hoping that he can realize some of the potential. I think you're really just taking a flyer back when he was a lottery pick all those years ago coming out of college. So I'm interested to see where this team ends up. But at the end of the day, there's excitement there where you feel like the Knicks are finally potentially headed in the right direction, but there's still a lot more building to do. And this is not a team that's going to contend. It's going to be famine for me. On to the Phoenix Suns, who made a pair of moves in this offseason. Chris Paul is the headliner. He is traded over from Oklahoma City to pair in the backcourt with Devin Booker. They also at a wing player in Jay Crowder, who was solid for the Heat in their run to the NBA Finals. For the Suns as potential contenders in the Western Conference, is it feast or famine for them?
Oh, this is a Thanksgiving feast. We got the gravy, we got the stuffing. I love the Suns. This team, I mean, what did they go when they went in the bubble? Like 8-0?
Yeah.
They went on some crazy run. I mean, look, I love Devin Booker. I mean, this guy, he says that Kobe was an inspiration to him, so he's got that Mamba mentality. Chris Paul, this guy will not go away. He is like LeBron. He's ageless. He was an all-star this year. I mean, the guy's like 35. I mean, I love that pairing. And, Jay Crowder was a big part of that Heat run to the finals this year. Very underrated player. He can guard pretty much any position despite his own, size limitations. He can score a little bit. Are the Suns going to upset the Lakers in the playoffs, or are they going to, take down the Clippers? Probably not. But I like this Suns team. I honestly feel, especially with the Warriors losing Clay this year, I definitely think that this Suns team, they could be a 5 seed. I like this team. They could be a 4. Chris Paul willed the Thunder into the playoffs. Now you add him with Devin Booker. This is a feast for me.
I hate to agree with you, but I'm going to have to agree with you here. And it is a feast. And I want to just touch on Chris Paul because he was so incredible playing in Oklahoma City. When he's out in Houston and the narrative is that he's washed up, he's the one who's holding the Rockets back. And when they make that trade for Russell Westbrook, things are really going to take off for them in Houston. And Chris Paul is going to live out his days in Oklahoma City or get waived because the Thunder don't think he can really play. They just want the picks. And this guy has just a ridiculous contract, and they're just taking it on to get the draft capital. And that wasn't the case at all. I mean, Chris Paul, for a team that was, I don't know what the over-under was for their win total, but no one expected them to sniff the playoffs. It wasn't even close. And he wills them to being better in the regular season than Houston was. Now, maybe that's an indictment. Some of the other pieces covered with Chris Paul did with that group was just extremely impressive. And I think that he, as somebody who facilitates as well as he does, will be a fit almost anywhere. And I'm excited to see what he does with Devin Booker. Jay Crowder is certainly a viable piece off the bench, or if you have to start him in a pinch at a wing player, and certainly a guy who can defend. So I like what you're getting in Jay Crowder, and certainly Chris Paul is a game changer. And we talked about this on draft night here on this program, and I'm not sure if the Suns are in that tier 1 in the Western Conference. They're not up there with the Lakers right now. They're not there with the Clippers, although they, I know, had an embarrassing, playoff exit. But to me, they're in that tier 2. They're in that same conversation with Denver and with Utah, and potentially, Houston, if they weren't to blow things up at the bottom end of that tier. I think they're on par and even better in sort of that tier 2, and could certainly contend. It's not to say that they're a team that you expect to go and potentially win an NBA championship, but could make some noise in the playoffs, and in catching the wrong team in the right series could knock somebody off, one of the big boys, whether it be the Lakers or the Clippers. So I really like what happened for the Suns this offseason, and am really impressed with what Chris Paul has been able to do the last few years of his career. Move on to the Atlanta Hawks, who signed Rajon Rondo, Danilo Gallinari, Boban Bogdanovic as well is on his way to the Atlanta Hawks. This is an interesting team because I'm not sure what to make of Atlanta with Trae Young there as well. They make a couple of moves. Is Atlanta feast or famine?
I'm going to say feast, but with a caveat. So I think this is a feast in the sense this team will make the playoffs. They're going to have a decent year, but they are not winning a title. Could they win a first round playoff matchup? Probably, but I don't love this team. Look, Rondo, I think, proved that he can still play. He was a pretty pivotal part of that Lakers team this year. I think he proved he can still play. Whether or not he's going to play on the floor at the same time as Trae, or going to back him up off the bench, who knows? Bogdanovic, I like. Now, obviously, he was going to go to Milwaukee, and then there was the whole tampering thing, and that fell apart. So, he ends up in Atlanta. That's interesting. So I like this team. Gallinari, look, Knicks fans know Gallinari pretty well. I think when he's healthy, he's a good player. The problem is that he's never healthy. He's hurt all the time. And to give him like a 3-year deal, now I know in the NBA they're just throwing away money all the time, but look, this team, like I said, they're gonna make the playoffs. They're gonna win some games. They'll be okay. But this is not an NBA championship team, so I'll say feast. But I don't love these moves. I'm not like, oh my god, they got Danilo Gallinari. They got, well, I like Bogdan, but what do you think, Nick?
I do like Bogdan, but at the same time, the Hawks are famine. They're not a team that I think will contend, and they're a fringe playoff team. I know the East is weak, and maybe they'll surprise me, but it just seems like they don't necessarily fit together. I think Trae Young is a guy who wants to handle the basketball and have things run through him. And now you add Rondo, who isn't really of service to you unless he is doing that and running things. I think that's kind of an odd mixture to see how things work out. Gallinari, a good wing player. I like the moves. I don't think that they are poor by any stretch, but I don't expect a ton out of the Hawks. I'm going to go famine there. On to Charlotte. The Hornets made a couple of surprising moves. They draft LaMelo Ball. That certainly wasn't a surprise at the top of the draft, but they signed one of the premier free agents at the beginning of things, and that's Gordon Hayward away from the Boston Celtics. There was talk about whether he would re-sign, potentially find a fit with the New York Knicks, but Hayward settles on the Charlotte Hornets. Feast or famine for the Hornets?
I'm going famine here, and I really have to question what the Hornets are doing. I mean, you're going to give Gordon Hayward all this money, but you wouldn't re-sign Kemba Walker. I mean, I understand. Look, Kemba made his mind up. I'm sure he got a big deal from them too. But look, I don't know what the Hornets are doing. I mean, they've just been stuck in this days, like this middle of the pack mode for years now. I mean, it's so funny to me for the team that is run by arguably the greatest basketball player of all time, probably the most competitive, to be like this blah team. First of all, with LaMelo, I don't understand. Can someone explain to me why people love the Ball brothers so much? I understand. Look, I understand they can pass very well. They're like good players. There's a lot of potential. Everyone watched Lonzo play, right? I don't think LaMelo. I understand people like LaMelo more than Lonzo, but they're saying like he's a comparable shooter to Lonzo. And like, I'm sorry, you don't draft a guy third overall just because he's going to make some pretty passes. And then Gordon Hayward, I'm sorry, he's not been the same guy since his injury. And I like Gordon Hayward. I wish him the best. But this team, I mean, these moves
looks like
so you can get a 7 seat. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I was just going to say it looks like there's been some issues here with Charlotte in the way that they have sort of constructed their roster. And I don't love exactly what they're doing. They are so hard to figure out, and you're just trying to get to the bottom of what the moves are. Are they a team that wants to build through the draft and continue to tack on lottery pick after lottery pick and do it that way? Or are you a free agent player and signing Gordon Hayward? And there are concerns about his health and ability to stay healthy, and that's a lot of money for a player. I like the Gordon Hayward signing, but this is not a team that's going to contend. This is famine all the way. There's not enough there. Terry Rozier is there as well. I think the point that you bring up is a valid one. If there was all this money available for you in Charlotte, why not give it to Kemba Walker? I think that there was an offer made, and my guess is that Kemba turned it down. Of course, not being privy to the contract negotiations that were there. I'm sure that Charlotte did everything that they could to keep him, and he decided to go elsewhere. But just sort of a funny thing and funny way that things have worked out for them. I don't expect them to be really contenders. Good for Gordon Hayward to sign that extension or sign that contract instead of going with the extension from Boston. But I don't see a lot happening in Charlotte. To the Pelicans, Brandon Ingram signing the extension. They bring in Steven Adams. They have Zion Williamson and a young core there that is really what the Lakers were before they traded for Anthony Davis. How are we feeling about the Pelicans right now, feast or famine for the Birds?
I would say feast, just because. Well, first of all, I don't think this is unique. I don't think because they brought in Steven Adams that this is suddenly a really good team. But Brandon Ingram is quietly, and a lot of people are paying. I mean, he's in New Orleans, but he's quietly becoming one of the better players in the NBA. I mean, this is a guy. He set career highs last season, averaged 23 points a game, 6 rebounds. He was an All-Star. He won Most Improved Player, and it's all the talk, and it's annoying, I'm sure maybe you feel the same way, is about Zion, Zion, Zion. I mean, look, he's a good player. I mean, he's hurt all the time. He barely played. He can't shoot anything outside the paint, but that's besides the point. So, but Brandon Ingram is quietly one of the better players in the NBA. I still think Zion's very good. So I think the two of them are a very good combo. I don't know if also we can't forget, in the trade, they got rid of Drew Holiday, but they bring in a lot of pieces, including Eric Bledsoe, who I think maybe could work well with them. You know, I like New Orleans. I will put them a tier below, like a Phoenix or Utah, maybe. But I think I'm going to go Feast here because I like Brandon Ingram a lot.
I do too. I'm going to go with Feast on New Orleans as well because of that young core, and I like what they have and continuing to gel together in New Orleans. And you're hoping that Zion Williamson can take a step in year 2 and continue to improve and get better and hopefully stay healthy. I think that's priority number 1 for him. And Brandon Ingram, as you mentioned, is a guy who has steadily grown and gotten better since getting into the league and quietly become one of the better players in all of the NBA. I mean, Brandon Ingram is no joke. And you bring in Steven Adams in a move that I like, and I think that it gives them a lot of flexibility to run certain things and be more of a physical basketball team with him and Zion. That's an imposing force. So I like what the Pelicans have done. I'm going to go Feast there. Let's wrap this thing up quickly. Finally, the Golden State Warriors, feast or famine after an injury to Klay Thompson and adding Kelly Oubre.
I'm going to go famine just because I don't trust Steph and Kelly to win a championship or really make a deep playoff run. I feel really bad for Klay. I mean, that's devastating. You rehab all year from ACL, and then you tear your Achilles. That is just awful. I like the Oubre move. I mean, you got Andrew Wiggins there too. I mean, we didn't really hear a whole lot from him after he got traded over there during the season. But just that trio, they're good players. I'm just not blown away by them. So I'm going to have to go famine.
I think it's going to be feast for them, but famine, it depends on what your expectations are. It's famine for the championship expectations, but I think they're certainly in tier 2. So if that's feast for the Suns, that's going to be feast for Golden State as well. I think that Steph Curry getting healthy and playing a full season is going to be the real deal. We forget how good Steph Curry is, even without Klay Thompson. I know that he is a huge part of what they do, but they add James Wiseman in the draft. They add Oubre. I know Klay Thompson's injury is a big deal, but I think the Warriors can still get things done and be a contender in that sort of tier 2 of the West. Not on the level of the Lakers, the Clippers, but I think they can make some noise. And a team that's well coached with Steve Kerr as well. So I like what Golden State has going on and some of the moves that they made this offseason, Wiseman in particular. We're going to have to take a quick break. On the other side of this one, we're going to talk some college football. The college football playoff rankings are out for the first time in 2020. Where is your team ranked? We're going to break it all down on the other side, one-on-one on a Wednesday night. Stay with us. here on One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show, 1010 here on the East Coast as we finish up our final 20 minutes of discussion. We're going to get into the first college football playoff rankings of 2020. At the top, no surprises, the University of Alabama is at number 1. Notre Dame slides in at number 2 with a big win over Clemson earlier this year. Those same Clemson Tigers who lost that game without their starting quarterback, Trevor Lawrence, are at number 3. And Ohio State, who is unbeaten, although did survive a scare and have only played 4 games, that scare against Indiana last week, round out the top 4. The first 2 out are Texas A&M and the University of Florida at 5 and 6. A surprise with Cincinnati up to 7. And then the big controversy being BYU all the way back at 14. They are 9-0. Some people have been impressed with the way that they have played this year with their star quarterback and Sam Wilson and how things are going there. So I'm interested, Mike, to just get into first your initial reaction to the playoff and where the rankings lie right now.
The top 5, I'm not surprised. Look, you knew that Alabama would be 1. You knew that Notre Dame, having beaten Clemson, would go to 2. You knew Clemson would be 3. You see Ohio State at 4, you're not surprised, but it's one of the bigger challenges in this COVID atmosphere is that between the Big Ten teams and the Pac-12 teams, we're ranking teams that have played like 3 or 4 games against teams that have played like 8 or 9 games. So it's very difficult to get an accurate picture. So I'm not saying this is a fake season by any stretch of the imagination. We're playing games. It's fine. The ranking system, I don't care what they say to me, but it's very, strange. My biggest issue, and I'm sure, I think we talked about this before, you feel the same way, is BYU being all the way at 14. I mean, this team is 9-0, but they're ranked behind 2 teams, Georgia and Oklahoma, that have 2 losses. I understand BYU is not a powerhouse college football program, but to me, that seems kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, it's tough to try and figure it out. And I know, Ligon, you're going to love this because I called him Sam Wilson in a Marvel reference. It's Zach Wilson, who's their quarterback and has been playing really well at BYU. So he's playing like a superhero, though, so I'll give him that. It's so odd, these college football playoff rankings. And then this year has just added another level to the oddity because Jimmy Sullivan and I have gone at it ad nauseum about what criteria are being met and what constitutes on the College Football Gridiron podcast about, okay, is this team the best team or is it the most deserving? And how do you differentiate between the two? Because presumably, I think most people would say that Clemson, especially losing the game to Notre Dame, is a better, without Trevor Lawrence, is a better team than is Notre Dame right now. If you asked me, who has to be the better team here, who I think it is, it's Clemson. That's what the eye test tells you, and they just lose the game without Trevor Lawrence, and yet Notre Dame is ranked ahead of them, as they should be because they're more deserving because they beat them. So it's just a weird sort of criteria. And then to see BYU down there, I know they haven't played the biggest strength of schedule. How they're behind Iowa State makes no sense to me. The University of Oklahoma, I know they've played better as of late, but Oklahoma has not been better than BYU this year. I just don't know how you make that case. And Georgia has been really up and down. I know that their 2 losses are good ones when you talk about Alabama and then Florida. So maybe that's a team where you can justify, okay, that they're in front of BYU with 2 really good losses. I don't know that any of this is really relevant as we get towards the college football playoff because BYU isn't going to sniff it. The teams that are here right now in this top 4, unless there's something that drastically changes, are going to stay that way because what I fully expect to happen is that Ohio State's going to win out, Alabama's going to win out, and Clemson and Notre Dame are going to play in the ACC championship. Clemson's going to beat Notre Dame, and it's going to be those 4 teams in a different order. So we can scream and yell about where the rankings are right now, but to me, they're going to end up working themselves out. At the end of the day, it is surprising, and I think what it tells you is that the strength of schedule is huge, and they don't necessarily weigh which team is better when you get to 2 Power 5 schools that you really value. Then it gets to most deserving, but when it's a battle between a team that's an independent, that is a BYU, that is a UCF, when you are a Power 5, a traditional blue blood program, the committee will value that over a team that is a fringe trying to make a run. I've always advocated, especially in this year when you're trying to line up the records. Ohio State's played 4 games, Florida played 7, A&M has played 6, Cincinnati's played 8. Just make it 8 for this year. Expand the playoff to 8. I don't know why they haven't done that. That to me is my biggest frustration with what we've seen out of college football this year. It's just so difficult when you add this next dimension of not only your strength of schedule, but what is by choice, what is not by choice, and then how many games have you played. So it's just difficult to figure out. But I think that's what it goes to show you, that the College Football Playoff Committee, if you're not a traditional blue blood program, they're not going to value what you've done, no matter how impressive you look doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I just think first off, I agree. It's a tricky thing with expanding the playoffs because we're not dealing with professional athletes here. We're dealing with college athletes. So, you're looking at a longer playoff, takes off more weeks. A lot of universities get different breaks. I understand it's football, so these guys are different, but it's a little messy situation. When it comes to BYU, look, no one's kidding themselves. BYU is not going to be a college football playoff team. We're not saying they should be in the top 4. They're not going to be in the top 4. My biggest thing is it's about respect. And the simple fact of the matter is, this team is 9-0. They should be higher than 14. And also, look, Georgia, you bring up Georgia. They lost to 2 good teams in Florida and Alabama. They lost by double digits in both of those games. It wasn't like those games were close. So, when it comes to BYU, I'm not a BYU fan. I'm not saying like, oh my gosh, they should be like super high. I just think it's just a matter of respect. But I think you're right on when it comes to the fact that the top 4 is not going to change. So then we kind of just get into like, who do we honestly feel is going to end up winning this thing at the end of the day?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you in what you said there. And at the end of the day, we can talk about this, and maybe the only potential for a change would be if Ohio State were to lose. I just don't see Clemson and I suppose Notre Dame could lose too. There's one other game on their schedule, UNC, who I don't expect them to lose, but that's a game where you could conceive it happening. So potentially there is that possibility for a shakeup, but it doesn't look that way. Notre Dame has played really well this year. And when push comes to shove, I think is going to be there at the end, as will Clemson and Ohio State, and certainly Alabama, who has played really good football as of late. So it's just tough to decipher, and always a headache with the College Football Playoff Committee and trying to figure out exactly where everyone's going to be ranked. But it's interesting to me just to see where the initial playoff rankings come in, and how the committee even says that the loss to Notre Dame for Clemson is more impressive or more valued than the wins for Ohio State, and they play Indiana closely, and they're slotted at the number 4 position. So a lot to take in and a lot to try and figure out as you navigate. There's still a long way to go. Very often these things work themselves out, as I just outlined. I think this will work itself out, so nothing to worry, college football fans. Although BYU, hey, I mean, they and Zach Wilson could use a little bit more respect going forward in those college football playoff rankings. We're going to take one final break before we come back and preview Turkey Day football, Detroit and Houston, Washington and Dallas. We're not going to have Baltimore and Pittsburgh, so not the greatest of matchups, but we still got to tell you who's going to win. You're going to get that and more when we come back. You're watching Nightly One-on-One right here on WFUV Sports. here on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show. Thanksgiving Eve here on this Wednesday evening as we will preview the two games that will be played on Turkey Day tomorrow, Detroit and Houston, and Washington football team against the Dallas Cowboys. Of course, Baltimore and Pittsburgh will be pushed to Sunday due to COVID-19 restrictions, regulations, and safety protocols. So let's start with the first game of the day, Mike. Detroit and Houston, in one that doesn't have a ton of implications going forward into the standings. Detroit has been middle of the road and a 500 team. Houston is a team in transition. They fire Bill O'Brien after the first 4 games. They don't have a first-round pick. Deshaun Watson has played really well. They're trying to figure things out on defense and get some more weapons and protection around Watson. What are your sort of thoughts going into this game about Detroit and Houston at noon?
Well, this is obviously not a very exciting matchup. This was definitely probably the weakest matchup. Maybe you want to argue Washington and Dallas, but there's a division at stake in that game. Look, both teams are not very good. They both have bad running attacks. So, it's to me, it comes down to the quarterbacks in this game. I personally I'm a big fan of Deshaun Watson, and I'm gonna have to go with the Texans in this one, just because I like Matthew Stafford as well, but I'm not impressed with the line. I'm not impressed with either team, to be honest. But look, when it comes down to it, the last 10 games that the Lions have played where they were favored, they lost. I mean, excuse me, that made no sense. What I meant to say was they're 3-7 against the spread in the last 10 home games. That's what I meant to say. So, they don't come out in the big game. It's just I don't trust them. I like Texans in this game, and I'm just gonna go with Houston in this one.
This is a tough game for me to get a read on because the Lions are so sort of inconsistent. They have a couple of wins this year over a team like Arizona that make you sit there and say, okay, this is a team that is moving in the right direction. And then they lose 20-0 to the Carolina Panthers last weekend against a quarterback who was last seen in the XFL. So I don't really know what to make of Detroit at all. I think that Houston is not the greatest of football teams, but their issues have been exacerbated by a really difficult schedule at the beginning of the season. Like, they were going to go 0-4 unless they played really good football out of the gate, and they have holes. There's no denying that. And then once you go 0-4, you lose your head coach, things can get off the rails a little bit. But I was really impressed with the way they played against New England last weekend. I like what I saw. Deshaun Watson was fantastic in that game. I'm going to agree with you, and I'm going to go with Houston here. Just too much inconsistency with Detroit. And you never know. They're at home, and it is Thanksgiving. But I just think that, as you rightly point out, the advantage in quarterback is with Houston. And I think that's what's going to make the difference in this game, because everything else is inconsistent. The quarterbacks can make the day. And I think Deshaun Watson is going to do that for Houston. Let's move on to the second and last game of the day. Again, with that cancellation, Washington and Dallas with the ever so coveted NFC East crown on the line. Both teams are 3-7. The Washington football team making a number of quarterback changes throughout this season. Of course, starting the year with Dwayne Haskins, they move on to Kyle Allen. He gets hurt. It's now Alex Smith at the helm, and just really difficult to get a read on either of these two teams too. Dallas looks like they're dead in the water. A couple weeks ago, Mike McCarthy starts smashing pumpkins and they have found new life. Washington didn't seem like a team that was very good during the middle of the season. They started pretty strong. They beat the Giants, who now seem like they would be the most talented team in this division. So a lot to unpack here. And for me, this is a huge game because Dallas, as bad as they have been, if they win this one, I think they might be on their way, as crazy as that sounds, because their schedule is so easy going forward. The Giants have a difficult one. Washington has just been so inconsistent with how they've played, although I think they could make a run at it as well. I don't know how you feel about this game, but I think there are major implications on the line. Although they're not great football teams, as you said, this is going to be interesting to watch.
Well, like you said, this is a it's hard to pick this game. These teams are not good. This year's NFC East is probably without a doubt the worst division in NFL history. So when in doubt, we got to turn to history to kind of help us out here. So Washington is actually 1-8 all time against Dallas on Thanksgiving. So look, history does not favor the Washington football team in this game. And just beyond that, I think this Dallas is a better team. Look, we understand that Mike McCarthy hasn't exactly blown it up, done an amazing job in Dallas this year. I like Washington's defense. I think they have a good defense. Dallas defense is a dumpster fire, but look, you have a competent quarterback in Andy Dalton. You're coming off a big, well, in the scheme of things, because now you're on the hunt for the division, a big win against Minnesota last week. Zeke had his first 100 plus yard rushing game of the season. Is this going to be a blowout game? No, it's going to be close. Honestly, now that Baltimore Pittsburgh is not happening this weekend, this is probably tomorrow. This is probably the most exciting Thanksgiving game we got. I'm going to go with Dallas in this one, just because I think at the end of the day they have more playmakers on offense. This is an offensive league. I like the fact that they're building some momentum after that last win. And look, to me, the winner of this game is probably going to win the division, like you said. I think Philly is atrocious. I think Carson Wentz, I don't know what happened to him. The Giants, I'm sorry, Giants fans, you're not winning the division. I'm sorry to break it to you. You're just not, especially when your coach is punching another one, your head coach. It's just not going to work out well. So I'm going to have to go with a Dallas in this game. I just have a good feeling about it, and we'll see what happens.
The thing for the Giants and the Eagles, who I think are two better football teams than both of these two, is that the schedule is so difficult going forward. So I know that the Eagles just are out of room to turn this thing around. Last week was the only win that they could get in the next few weeks. They're playing Seattle this weekend on Monday Night Football. That's not happening. They're not beating Seattle. Their schedule is brutal going forward, so they're out. The Giants have a difficult schedule as well, though they're playing the most consistent football out of any of these teams in this division. Is just going to, I think, be a moot point because of the teams that they're playing, and not that they're some outstanding team either. I'm going to go with Washington here because I just can't get the first game that these two teams played this season out of my mind. And I know that Andy Dalton didn't finish the game, and I know that it was in Washington, and there were some elements and a number of factors that led to that result. But Washington beat the brakes off of Dallas in the first meeting, and that's just hard to ignore. I know that Dallas has played better football of late. I just trust Washington's defense more than any other unit on the field. I think that the Dallas offense can be boom or bust. We know that their defense is always bust. Offense varies for Washington, but that defense is going to be consistent. I like and am confident in the plan that Ron Rivera is going to bring forward. So I'm going to take Washington to take down the Dallas Cowboys on Thanksgiving. I think Dallas loses at home on Thanksgiving for a second year in a row. Of course, Baltimore and Pittsburgh, a game that we were all looking forward to. That one with huge implications in the AFC North divisional race will be postponed until Sunday. We talked about that at the top, and we will be limited to 2 games on Thanksgiving tomorrow. That's it for us here on Nightly One-on-One. If you missed any of tonight's conversation, it will be available on demand on WFUV Sports' Twitter and Instagram pages, and on demand on YouTube. For our producer, Alex Wolves, and Mike Legan, I'm Nick DeLuca. Thanks for hanging out with us, and have a happy Thanksgiving, everybody. One-on-One, as always, is a production of WFUV Sports.